The Tinley Park man heard about squatter stories before, but never thought it could actually happen to him. So he called us, and we got right on this case. Stephen Brill was excited to sell this Tinley Park home that he purchased and renovated earlier this year.
I put the house on the market Monday evening, and then yesterday at 4 p.m. an agent went to go show the house for a showing.
During that showing, he says the real estate agent discovered the lockbox had been broken and a family of 4 with 2 dogs was living inside. The property owner says he showed up with police that same day. He says someone came outside and showed police this lease, claiming they paid a deposit and had a right to be there. That is right. The women in Hazel Crest saw our story last week and were in utter disbelief. They say the same people who took over the Tinley Park home did the same thing to their property. What they had to do to get these people out of their home might just shock you.
So last year on this channel, we covered a bunch of different squatter-related stories as they were reaching a national fervor because of how ridiculous these cases are. And there's a fundamental flaw in the law, which, by the way, is not just in blue cities in blue states. It is also true of red cities and blue cities within red states and across the country, which basically says that evictions, issues between landlords and tenants, those are civil issues. However, when you illegally evict a tenant, that happens to be a criminal offense. So oftentimes, even though it was clear and obvious that the tenant was not a real tenant, they were in fact a squatter, sometimes using fraudulent documentation in order to squat in a specific property, what ended up happening was if the landlord or homeowner decided to remove said squatter, they would be arrested and of course the criminal would be restored. Now, of course, New York City took this so over the top and made it so ridiculous that what ultimately ended up happening was even if you caught a squatter within a week of them staying there, after 30 days, their tenant rights or squatter's rights would attach and then you would be totally screwed over. But the thing is, you would still have to bring them to court in order to get them out, but you couldn't get an appointment for 2 months.
But she's been locked out. She claims squatters moved in on February 6th and refused to leave.
What's it like being here knowing you can't go inside of your own home?
It's enraging. It really is.
In New York, squatters have rights after 30 days.
By the time that someone does their investigation and they do their work and their job, will be well over the 30 days, and this man will have stolen my home.
So what we saw time and time again were people detecting the person who broke into their property, who broke into their home, only to discover that they had a document that said that they lived there longer than 30 days, even though they've been there for a week, but it couldn't get adjudicated until 60 days, and by the time it was being reviewed by the court, guess what? They would still have those rights regardless of whether or not their original documents were deemed to be fraudulent. And this, of course, led to disaster across the city of New York, but make no mistake about it, these problems are still happening. In fact, we're going to highlight a serial squatter in the city of Chicago, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
These 2 ladies are business partners. They own this house in Hazel Crest, which they were hoping to sell this month. But last week, they got a call from a realtor informing them a group of people with 2 dogs moved into their home.
Am I being punked? I can't believe this is happening to us.
They say they rushed to their property and met this man, who identified himself as LaShawn Rankin. They say they took this photo of him from their front yard as they asked him to leave. The ladies say he claimed that he paid a landlord $4,000 in cash to rent this home for his family and signed a lease. He said he wasn't leaving.
So I want to state something that is completely obvious to those of you who are watching this particular video, which is these 2 women, these 2 business partners, the owners of this property that basically had it stolen from them by this serial squatter who has done this multiple different times in order to extort money from these homeowners. They're women. They're black women, and they're running a small business, or they're business partners, and they're trying to unload this property that likely they were using as a rental property, yet they are being screwed over by this supposedly progressive legislation, this supposedly noble idea of squatters' rights that people on the left, like over at the Majority Report, think are awesome and we should keep, and honestly we should increase, while denying that they exist, by the way.
There's no actual squatters' rights in New York, at least. There should be, but
to the extent they exist anywhere, it's because the alternative is brutality that people actually can't fathom, even in bygone years. That's why squatters' laws exist in England or whatever. It's because otherwise you just can't. Because we're so used to enforcing, like, bending society towards the capitalist needs now that we can't even fathom how these sorts of rights could have ever been enshrined for people that just need shelter.
But this is the impact of that disconnected progressivism. This is the impact of those luxury beliefs, which is ordinary people who may have one or two properties that they're making income off of, or a partnership like these two women have, getting screwed over by these extortionists who do this time and time again. And again, as we've documented on this channel, in this particular case, it's a business that they're running, but in other cases, it wasn't a business. That Latina woman who was arrested in her own property in New York City, she inherited the home from her parents who died, and then you had somebody who broke in, started modifying the property, and was demanding tens of thousands of dollars from that woman, from the homeowner, from the woman who has to deal with her parents passing away and what she's going to do with this home, trying to sell it to another buyer, and she ended up being screwed over and arrested on top of that. Now, of course, luckily that ended up leading to a conviction, but in this particular case, the obvious thing ended up occurring.
So the ladies called the police.
They told us that this is a civil matter. It is absolutely nothing that they can do. They showed them a lease with their name on it. How do we know that they're not being scammed?
This is such an annoying response from the police, but make no mistake about it, this is the response that the left-wing progressives, the limousine liberals, champagne socialists, whatever you want to call them, the people with the luxury belief that squatting is no big deal at all whatsoever, want to happen. They want the police to be completely powerless to adjudicate this. And by the way, the explanation that you have no idea if they're being scammed, to me, is totally insufficient as a recourse for the property owner, because regardless of whether or not they signed this agreement with a property management company that was scamming them, that should not be on the property owner's fault. They should not have to deal with it. They should not have to pay the cost with it. But of course, obviously, this is a fraudulent lease agreement. Obviously, this is a forged document, and we are going to discover that not only was this so obviously a forged document that it could make the local news media, but even the local district attorney realized, oh, wait a minute, this guy has been in multiple different instances of this same situation with the same default document. And eventually, the good news in this particular story is that after all the attention that this criminal ended up getting, he was ultimately arrested for the crimes that he was committing. Now, of course, it's alleged he hasn't been convicted at this moment in time, but the same person supposedly has been scammed repeatedly by all these different property management companies every time he decides to rent an apartment, to the point where they could do local news segments on it. Multiple different people will call in and say, no, he did the exact same thing to me. It seems like, as of right now, he did in fact do the crime, but it is alleged because he has yet to be convicted.
The ladies learned their only recourse was to evict them, which could take months. They say the people inside asked them for money to leave. And after negotiating, the ladies had them sign a cash for key agreement and gave them $2,700 to vacate.
I did not want to pay. I wanted to call their bluff. I thought that if we actually went the legal route of eviction, I felt like eventually they would have given in. However, I did know that they would have longer access to the house and we could lose potential buyers.
So again, this is the unfortunate result of these squatting schemes. What ultimately ends up happening is that these people take advantage of the fact that the police view this as a civil matter. They don't want to intervene in these particular cases. And then ultimately, they end up offering them a middle ground because they're like, hey, look, the eviction process, I don't know how I would know this as a random person who is just being scammed by a property manager, wink, wink, but the eviction process will take way too long. It's going to cost you so much money in order to evict us, but we are willing to meet in the middle, as it said in the text message, and take a cash for keys agreement where you pay us money and we'll move along and it's no big deal. And again, all of the pressure is on the homeowner because it's not like these people have any money on their own. It's not like you're going to be able to sue them for the damage that they inflict to your property. Essentially, you are negotiating against a terrorist that took your home hostage, and they are going to destroy the property in order to get what they want. So it ends up becoming more cost effective for you to pay them. And that's exactly what these two women who were in a business partnership ended up doing.
A couple days later, the lady saw our story about a man in Tinley Park who claimed squatters had moved into his house and refused to leave.
And I see a dog come out, and I see this young gentleman walking the dog. I see the coat. I said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is them, this is them.
Now, of course, whenever you give in to a criminal, whenever you reward them for criminal behavior, they end up doing it again. So a couple of days later, and by the way, this was in a news segment that was actually shot a week prior to these women coming forward, but in continuity, it was after, they ended up in another person's home running the same exact scam, running the same exact scheme, and these women ended up recognizing the man with the dogs and the jacket and all of that as the same perpetrator, to which they ended up trying to contact the local news, contact the police to explain that they fell for this scam. Even though they knew it was a scam, they just paid to get out of it as fast as possible, and this other person was being victimized. By the way, this is an actual community coming together. These two women end up seeing another person suffering, another person facing a similar situation that they were in, and they decide to step forward, and their combined efforts ultimately ended up leading to a good outcome that we'll discuss at the end of the video. But as of right now, let's just go into what happened at the other property, the Tinley property.
Take a look at the Tinley Park lease and the Hazelcrest lease. They're nearly identical.
We are going to criminally investigate.
Mitchell Davis, chief of police in Hazelcrest, says LaShawn Rankin is connected to other alleged squatting cases.
That's the common name in Tinley Park, Hazelcrest, and in South Highland that we've seen.
He says current law prevents police from removing alleged squatters on the spot. If they have a signed lease, it's hard for an officer to determine if it's invalid. But Chief Davis says with this new information, he's working with the Cook County State's attorney to see if any crimes like extortion or fraud were broken.
So yeah, because this woman came forward, because she ended up presenting this fraudulent lease document to the police, they were able to realize that both of these leases were nearly identical. Now, again, two things could be a possibility here. First and foremost, this guy who's connected to multiple different squatting incidents that always offers the landlord or the property owner or the homeowner some kind of reprieve by paying him a settlement for a cash for keys agreement only to get out and end up in the same situation, could just be consistently scammed by the same property management company that is so unethical because, oh my God, isn't it sad that they're trying to make money off of housing, trying to make money off of renting? What a scumbag. Landlords are so bad. Oh my God. Oh, what are we going to do about the landlords? Or, and just hear me out, just let me spitball a little bit for you guys out there in the audience. It could be that this guy is scamming all these different people, that he's not stumbling into this situation time and time again inadvertently. It's not a coincidence that he's getting the same exact fake looking agreements from the same exact fake property management company. In reality, what is actually going on here is that this individual is scamming all these different various people. And the reason that he pushes so quickly in order to settle this is so that he can get the cash and move on, because he's hoping that these different various property owners will be none the wiser. Again, I'm just throwing it out there. I could be a tinfoil hat conspiracy nut on this particular regard. He could be the dumbest person in the United States of America. He could be the most scammed renter in the history of this nation that always seems to come out on top, that always seems to get a cash settlement from these particular property owners only to move on and find himself in another situation like this just days later. But I'm just speculating that maybe, just maybe, that's not the case and that this is an actual crime.
These ladies say they want the alleged squatters to be stopped and held responsible.
I believe that they are house hopping. I think they're very sophisticated. I feel like they have a routine that they follow.
When the ladies finally got their property back, they say it smelled of marijuana and there was trash everywhere, so they had to pay to get it cleaned. The Hazelcrest police chief, he says homeowners should ask their neighbors to watch over their homes when they are away and install cameras outside and inside the home. That way you can call 911 the minute you detect someone breaking in.
Now look, that's sound advice from the police department in this particular area, and again, I'm not going to come down too hard on the cops because it is hard for them to adjudicate what is and isn't a fraudulent document on the spot. But yeah, you should put in the cameras in your rental properties, especially when they're unoccupied. Try to get your neighbors involved if they even care, if that's even a possibility, so that way you can actually charge these people with the crime that they're committing, which is breaking and entering. I mean, we have a crazy system in the United States of America where if you break into a property and you steal something from the property, that's a felony. I mean, that makes sense. That's a burglary. We all understand that. But for some reason, in many parts of this nation, if you break into a property and then steal the property, then that's a civil issue. And honestly, if somebody tries to remove you, then they could be charged with a misdemeanor or a felony. It's absolutely crazy. But again, I promised you a good end to this story. I promised you a good twist, and that is the fact that this serial squatter was finally arrested.
LaShawn Rankin is a name that has come up in 3 alleged squatting cases, and we are now learning the Chicago man has been charged with residential burglary and forgery. That's 2 felonies. Police say they caught Rankin moving into a home in Evergreen Park that was on the market to be sold. Officials also say he knowingly made a fraudulent lease agreement for that same Evergreen Park property with the intent to defraud the property owner.
Yes, finally, LaShawn Rankin has been held accountable. They caught him doing it yet again, moving into another property, forging another document, of course, all in an attempt to extort the property owner because that home was on the market and he knew that he could take advantage of that situation. Justice is finally starting to be served, and I just want to point out for everybody out there in the audience that this is in Cook County. Cook County, of course, is the county that contains the city of Chicago, but it also is the county that formerly had District Attorney Kimberly Fox. Kimberly Fox has been replaced with a better district attorney. Might be slightly better, but that doesn't matter, but it just shows you the difference a prosecutor makes, because when something actually comes to the attention of them and they're not ideologically motivated in order to side with the criminal, they can actually pursue avenues of criminal charges. Now, of course, obviously, Emma Vigeland is devastated by this. In fact, I have some footage of her reacting live to the news that the squatter, that this home thief, ended up being arrested and held accountable that I'll play for you.
Police say they caught Rankin moving into a home in Evergreen Park that was on the market to be sold. Officials also say he knowingly made a fraudulent lease agreement for that same Evergreen Park property with the intent to defraud the property owner.
Now, some of you might be saying, Sean, you edited that together. How would you even possibly obtain live footage of her reacting to this? But trust me, guys, trust me, that happens to be the case. She was very devastated, but all of us in the normal, sane, rational world understand that this is a good outcome and that these people should be punished. They're scammers, they're fraudsters, and they make society worse. And again, if you remember in the previous story, it's not like they move in and then just take the money and go. They trash the place, costing the homeowner additional money because these people are scumbags through and through. They're not victims of society. They are predators in society.
And was arrested. This week, the ABC 7i team reported that Rankin was being looked into for alleged squatting in Tinley Park, Hazel Crest, and South Holland. But in a text message, Rankin denies any wrongdoing, saying in part, quote, "I haven't committed any crimes against anyone, and I have not extorted anyone. The realtors and property managers are the ones who rented to me without the owners having knowledge and act like they don't know what's going on. I have not forced entry at all. I am not a criminal. I paid my money to rent, and they gave me keys and lease. It's not my fault your property managers and agents are frauds."
So look, I wanted to play that text message for you guys out there in the audience because you might have thought I was joking about this guy actually coming up with the defense that he just keeps getting scammed time after time after time. Again, they have maybe half a dozen to a dozen reports prior to the local news covering this individual of him breaking into these places, forging fraudulent documents, end up extorting the property owner for money. But this guy says all of those instances, all of those times he ended up signing the same exact printed out contract repeatedly, and he was just being scammed. It's not his fault that your property managers and the people that you have as realtors are actually the real frauds. They're the ones taking his money. He's the real victim in this particular case. And again, if you believe that, you're either incredibly stupid or you're incredibly stupid and the host of a progressive media outlet like the Majority Report. You're buying into the fact that these people are victims. You have to be super educated in progressive idiocy in order to do so, but we should not be surprised that these people would try to get by on this because there are enough champagne socialists, wussified lefties in order to enable this kind of behavior. But of course, I want to know what you guys think about all of this down in the comments below. Is LaShawn an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin, who's just being scammed by these property managers, by these landlords, who are the real leeches on our society? Or is he in fact what he appears to be, a perpetrator, a criminal, a thug, a brute who deserves to be sent to prison for his actions? Now again, innocent until proven guilty, allegedly, but I just don't buy into the idea that he was scammed by property managers and realtors 27 times repeatedly with the same exact documentation, and he constantly got a payout each and every time, and he's still the victim. I'm just saying, that's just my speculation right there, but it is alleged. Again, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the madness of these serial squatters. Till next time.